Good afternoon or morning or whatever time it is, wherever you are, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is Recruiting EQ, episode 34, differentiating yourself in a complex market. I have with me Ian Ewell, who is, I'm excited to have you on. Actually, it's been a while we've been talking about you having you on as a guest. Welcome.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you are, and we're going to get to this in a second, but just briefly, actually, let me give my disclaimer, my usual disclaimer, for how it works with comments. If you're watching this live, please do comment. There's been a lot of participation every week, and I appreciate it. And Ian appreciates it too, even though this is new for him today. But you are either on Facebook or LinkedIn. We are not on those platforms. So when we see your comment come through, if it's over a certain number of characters, it's going to get cut off. We'll take some pauses and lulls in the conversation to read out your comments. We will not name you because this is being recorded and it'll be there, and we don't want to get you in trouble for being on a Rec to Rex podcast when you should be working. Maybe. But thank you for being here. So there you go. Disclaimer done. Ian, happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday.
Can you do us all the favor of introducing yourself a little bit, giving us a bit of background on you?
Sure. So my name's Ian. Been in the staffing industry for the last 17 years. And I've done sort of the full gamut. I started off in the admin staffing sort of space with a large firm. Worked for a couple of small firms, started my own recruitment firm with a business partner, and built that from scratch. Sold it 6.5 years later to a company out of Vancouver, and then went and worked for, I guess, the biggest staffing agency in the world as a director of operations, VP of sales. Worked through a bunch of different opportunities and roles there. So it's been I've sort of seen a bit of everything.
Yeah, you have, and now you're in the AI and RPA space as well.
Yes. Yeah. So now to the consulting world. And specifically, so right now I'm the president of Greenlight Tech Staffing. We're the staffing division of Greenlight Consulting, which is an RPA, AI RPA consulting firm.
Well, there you go. And congratulations on the new role.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a special thank you to Rick for helping me with this role. It was a great process.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. And the Greenlight is, we don't usually name drop people or like what the relationship is, but I'm happy to co-brand with you and with Greenlight, whatever. It's very interesting stuff. And definitely, I also feel that the AI and consulting space is a hot topic that comes up a lot when I speak to staffing people, both on the client and the candidate side, particularly in people who are doing IT sales in staffing. Lots of questions about getting into SaaS sales, getting into AI-related sales or staffing. So I think that this is going to be an interesting spot, and this is a good time for anybody who has questions about that to take them to Ian, and we will discuss them here. Just briefly, though, the timing of the hot topic in the news this morning, yesterday morning, on CBC anyway, was the Nobel Prize, which there was a Nobel Prize for Physics awarded to two gentlemen, one of whom is a British-Canadian fellow by the name of Geoffrey Hinton, who works at U of T, but again is at the forefront and has been at the forefront of the AI conversation from a physics perspective, also a cognitive scientist, and his work on artificial neural networks is what got him the nickname, the Godfather of AI. And so topical to that, this is my first episode talking about AI. And just yesterday, someone who is Canadian, British Canadian, was awarded a Nobel Prize for being an AI. So Canada really being kind of a forefront player in the AI conversation.
I saw him speak actually last year at the Collision Conference in Toronto, and eloquent speaker, amazing thinker, thought leader, terrifying at the same time. The things he had to say, it was end times, end of the world, very, very dark at times, but very interesting.
At Collision, what I mean, I'm sure he gets to the end times thing everywhere he goes, right? Because he famously left. I looked him up a little bit afterwards, and he famously left working for Google in 2023 because he's so concerned with how fast everything's evolving. But at Collision, out of curiosity, was that the main focus of the topic, or like what was he there speaking on?
Yeah, he was there speaking on AI. I mean, everyone was there speaking on AI.
Yeah.
That every single session that I went to was AI focused. So, what I'm hearing a lot from clients is the desire to move into AI and move into incorporating that into their business processes. Very little knowledge in how to do that and where to do that. And I think that's one of the pieces that is missing, right? You get an executive leadership that's saying, let's implement AI. And then the technology group is saying, well, where do you want us to do that? How do we do
What
this?
the hell do you mean when you say that, right? Like,
Exactly. And so a lot of the discussions that I've had with clients is around, okay, well, let's take let's look at your processes and say, okay, what are your current processes? Where could we dig in? What would be sort of the best place to start and show some value, create a use case, and then be able to sell that back to the executive leadership. Say, here's what we did. Here's the ROI. Here's how we've saved the company money, time, whatever, efficiency, and then start to build that out. But it's a painstaking process because there are a few people that are real experts in that area, which is part of what I love about Greenlight is we've got that expertise in house. I'm week 5 into this role. So fairly new, and the amount of automation that exists within our systems already, because we have internal automation teams, is unbelievable. You click a button and all these things happen in the background. I'm still learning all the things. I'm scared to click certain buttons because I don't know how far down the chain it'll go. But yeah, just having access to that's something I've never had, even working for the largest staffing firm in the world. Very little as far as automation, very little as far as AI. Because it's such a massive thing to take on.
Yep, absolutely. But I guess so. My understanding of, and we'll get to this a little bit more in depth later for sure. But while we're on the topic, my understanding of what you're doing in the staffing for a company that is also an AI consulting firm, the consulting approach is really auditing, brokering, ushering a company through the steps of where they could automate or use AI-based solutions, and then helping them implement those and then maintaining that, because people just don't even really know. They don't have an AI expert on staff. This is my
understanding. And I am not an AI expert. Let's just put that out there, like disclaimer.
Me neither. So anyone who came here to get AI expertise, leave now or give us your expertise, please.
I know some people, but I am not the expert. But that's the beauty of it, is that we've got the expertise in-house that we can bring to the table and say, hey, let's usher you through this. What's actually going to make sense? And if you look on the website, the Greenlight website, it talks about the number of hours saved, the all of the actual ROI that comes from this process. It's very, very tangible. Tech staffing is maybe a little less tangible, but the RPA piece and that side of the business is very, very tangible.
Well, awesome, yeah. And so this brings us again to the crux of today's topic, because based on our conversations, Ian, I feel like this could have been 4 hours. So let's focus in on what we want to focus in on, which is you mentioned, within tech staffing, and there's an AI slant there. You have in your career done the extremes, I would say, of what I've seen out there in staffing, particularly with sales and branding, starting up your own company, having to pitch a brand that is brand new, that's just a startup, selling that company, and then working for, like you say, for the biggest company there is in staffing, biggest, oldest company. Let's just, I guess, say who they are, which is Randstad. And that's a completely different pitch and sale and position of who you are in the market. And then now to go into a company that is, yes, staffing, but also at the core consulting, which is a very hot topic in terms of where I talk to a lot of people in staffing, where they want to try to angle and go. Meanwhile, Greenlight is at the core a consulting firm with staffing and not the other way around. So this has really given you like a wide pendulum swing of types of ways to position yourself in the market selling staffing. And that to me is interesting. I'd love to maybe just hear what you think on that. Maybe we can even go through chronologically what it's been like and how you feel about the different approaches.
Absolutely. Yeah. We can start with Red Recruitment. So the firm that I started with, Alan Spackman, my business partner, just put that out there. Alan's a great guy. My best friend still to this day. So we survived 6.5 years of running a business together, sold it,
Somehow.
and still talk to each other,
What?
which is amazing. So yeah, I mean, starting a brand from scratch. We were very much a Calgary focused recruitment firm. And finding ways to differentiate ourselves was the absolute most important part of developing the brand. And we tried a few different things. Part of our approach was very much the lack of the salesy sort of approach to things, where we were relationship builders. We were building relationships with clients, building relationships with candidates, treating people the way that we thought they should be treated. That was one aspect. But our focus, we had to really focus in onto an industry segment. So finance and accounting was really where we spent the bulk of our time. We had a bit of an IT practice towards the end, but finance and accounting was really where we started. But at the beginning, you sort of want to take on anything that you can. You're trying to get a foot in the door with a client. You're trying to show that there's value and there's something to your brand. And I remember the first time that I turned down a role. It was such a painstaking process. I talked to Alan. We were like, do we do this? Are we at a point where we could actually say no to business, right? And it was incredibly, there's a lot of trepidation going into it, but it was incredibly liberating on the other side, where we started to say, okay, you know what, this is who we are. This is what we do. This is the value that we add. And that's the foundation of what we built our brand on. And to this day, I still run into clients that say like, hey, nobody's really taken that space. Like I used to just be able to call you and I knew what you were the service that you were going to give us. I knew the types of candidates that you had in your network and all of those things. And so really being able to identify that area that you can grow and develop and build off of, that becomes the foundation. That was very, very critical for that small sort of new brand coming in.
So a couple questions I have for you on that then. First of all, how did you find that the pitch of being a startup was received? Now, in hindsight, that you've done a lot of different stuff, do you find that, and if this was pre-COVID, obviously by a bit, so I'm sure that's changed, which would be interesting to touch on, but like, was it well received if you called up, let's say, some company with a candidate or whatever else to try to pitch them, or even just pitch them on your services as a startup, or was that a big obstacle at all, just to get a call or a meeting in the first place?
I think, at the beginning, I had a pretty big network already to start with, which helped. Yeah. So I had some relationships that were already in place. Maybe, a company that I hadn't worked with before, but I knew somebody who had moved into that organization. And so the calls were received quite well. For the most part, but then there's the straight cold calls, and that was a little bit more difficult. But at the same time, it's about finding, a lot of this industry in general is about timing, right?
Sure, yes.
Small company, after they get their 300th call from an agency that week, and
it's going to go great.
Different. I remember I left a voicemail one time for net new clients, cold call out of the blue, left a voicemail thinking like, there's no way this person's ever going to call me back. Within 2 hours, I got a call back. And the client said, like, there was just something different about the voicemail that you left. Like, it just sounded different, and I felt like I should call you back. And that was really heartening for me. I felt like, okay, I don't want to sound like all the other salesy, like, give me your business, and if you don't have anything, then I don't have time for you, right? So that's actually one of the best compliments I think I've ever gotten.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that you're right, though, right? It's little things. It's so easy to lose faith when you're cold calling that your next call is going to be positively received, especially when you get a few. It's just human nature, right? Just think that way. But funnily enough, something as simple as the tone of your voice or the vibe that you exude is, in a lot of ways, pretty powerful, despite what we may think of, like, oh, if they don't need my service, I'm just bugging them or whatever. You really get in your head, when you're doing cold calling, and it's hard to keep that positivity. But that's a great story of like, you didn't even expect to call back here, and then they're calling you back and saying like, yeah, it was your vibe and your tone of voice that prompted the call back, not that I have an urgent need and I just happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think we ever did business with them. Like, I don't think anything ever really came out of it, but it was a really neat. It was a neat story that or like just a bit of feedback on how it was perceived, because you never know how you're perceived in the market, right?
Yeah.
That feedback is valuable.
It's super valuable, and I would imagine that it's crazy valuable when you're in a startup because you literally don't know how you're perceived in the market. There's no sampling. You're finding it out one call at a time. Is
Yeah.
who you are and who people think you are. You're finding it's changing every minute, I would imagine.
Yeah, and we had some pretty good success at the beginning. We started in 2013. 2015, we were voted one of the 50 fastest growing private companies in Alberta through Venture Magazine,
Awesome.
which was really exciting. We were there. We were at the award the year before. We got invited by a client of ours was getting one of these awards, and Alan and I were standing there. We're like, next year we want to be on that stage, and we were, which was really
That's
cool.
amazing.
But 2015, with the day that we got the award, we were already in a recession, and so it was kind of a weird. It was an Alberta sort of based recession at that time, and
Yeah.
so one of the things that we did to pivot from a BD perspective, we made a decision that we were going to treat all of our clients, whether they had needs or didn't have immediate needs, as though they were the most important clients to us. And we really spent our time, our resources. We still took people for lunch, maybe not quite as often as before, but we took time with clients to hear the pain points that they were going through. A lot of them were struggling with having to lay people off, and trying to help out where we could to place those people that were good that they were laying off. And we made that conscious decision to really treat clients differently than they were being treated by other firms. Obviously in the hopes that it's going to turn around, but that wasn't necessarily that. We weren't just holding on and as soon as we realized, oh, maybe it's not going to turn around, maybe they're not going to use us, didn't matter. We just spent our time out with clients face to face, learning about them, learning about their organization, their culture. And it just happened that when things did turn around, it put us in a position where we had our second best year as a company in 2018, and we were able to sell January of 2019, 1 year before a global pandemic, which makes us business experts. It was not, we had no idea that was coming, but
that is timing for you. Were you in Back to the Future 2? Do you have a sports almanac from the future?
I'm not able to disclose that.
No, I mean, honestly, like that's just sheer amazing luck to have successfully sold your business just before a global pandemic and all that uncertainty.
I remember when offices started shutting down here in Calgary, or going remote, not shutting down, but going remote. Alan texted me, he said, "Aren't you glad you don't own a boutique recruitment firm right now?"
Yeah, seriously. And by this much, missed it by that much.
Exactly.
So the interesting thing there to me is, here you are in a position where there's a couple of things there that you mentioned that are interesting. The perception, I'm sure, of people who were seeing you on that stage in 2015 as one of the fastest growing private companies in Calgary is probably different from the reality of you guys having to face, like, okay, we're going into a recession now. We're still a small business. Like, you know what I mean? And so we can't behave like big shots or whatever else. You know what I mean? You can't celebrate that victory for too long, or maybe even at all, because the reality is things change so quickly in the market that you might be one of the top 50 fastest growing, but maybe nobody's growing. You guys are one of the only ones growing. And that's why you have the award, because the economy is slow. So there's also this, perception versus reality kind of thing, which is very skewed in recruitment, I find.
Yeah, you can't believe the hype. The reality is, we always saw, how much run rate we had financially, emotionally, physically, like all of those things, that it takes a toll, right? There's a lot that you carry as a business owner. And I think, that was part of what led us to sell in 2019 was we realized, okay, we just had our second best year as a company. If we're going to do this and take some of the pressure off of ourselves, as far as that carrying the weight, month to month, year to year, that kind of thing, we were going to have to invest heavily. And so we would have had to go all in, put everything on the line. And little did we know that there was a global recession coming around the corner.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
We made the right decision in that sense. And there's something very liberating. I mean, there's nothing like the pressure of needing to perform when it's your own money on the line. That creates a sense of urgency, there's no excuses. You are either going to make it or you won't, based on your own actions alone, and you can't replicate that anywhere else. But through the course of my career, I've been able to find opportunities where I've been able to play and create and reimagine things using someone else's money. And that's a little bit, you sleep a little bit better at night. There's a little bit more forgiveness in that, but it's something that's never left me. I still treat it as though it's my own money.
Well, for sure. And I mean, so here's my point of interest though, is what a difference, just from a sales perspective. I'm thinking as a sales guy, it's your own brand. You're in accounting and finance. You guys were a startup. Yes, after a little bit, you got an award that gave you some visibility. But for the 6 years there, you're still the guy. You're the buck stops at you, and Alan. And then shortly thereafter, you're at Randstad, which is a whole different pitch in my head. And again, perception versus reality. How did that change how you positioned calls, meetings, to get in the door, to do sales, to do anything you were doing?
Yeah, I mean, it was very much, it was a different world, right? My first role in there was the director of operations. So it was kind of a neat way to enter into the organization, because it wasn't client facing to start with. I learned how things operated, how what the processes were, all of the different aspects of it. We were also implementing a new software system, which I think I came in 2 or 3 weeks before the first module went live. So talk about interesting timing.
Yeah, exactly. Tons of time to prepare.
Yeah. But I realized, I mean, the sales piece is really where my heart is, and being in front of clients is really where I wanted to be. So it was a great learning curve. But 4 months in, there was a VP position that opened up, overseeing their large enterprise, high volume, low margin, MSP, VMS type business, which you could not get any further from what I had done at Red.
Yeah, totally different territory.
And it was kind of like I was in the role, or in the group, that we were actively campaigning almost against at Red, in the sense of like, we're different. We're not like those big firms that just take the volume and just spit out resumes and that kind of thing. But there was opportunity in that to reimagine it, and that was actually one of the first things that I did. So the group is called RCD, Randstad Central Delivery, and it was a group that had operated in a specific way for years and years and years. And about 2 or 3 months in, it was requested that it be reimagined, and so it was one of the coolest exercises I ever did. Actually, was sitting there looking at this big machine within this group and moving away all the pieces and saying, okay, if I could start this from scratch, how would I do it? And it was incredibly liberating, terrifying at the same time,
I'm sure.
And I got to take these pieces and put them together, this puzzle together, in a new way that had never been done before. We grew substantially, but we had no money to invest, and so we had to repurpose things. We built an offshore team that was responsible for sourcing. They grew from 8 people to 55 people. Created new roles onshore in Canada. Reimagined the sales process to become more efficient and cost effective, while still rewarding the salespeople in the right ways. It was such a complex thing to do. And I remember I was about 85% of the way there in my mind. I'd sort of gotten to 85%, and I was meeting with my boss, and she said, where are we at? What are we doing? Like, have you pulled the trigger yet? And I was like, well, I'm 85% there. And she said, 85, like, that's amazing. Just do it. Pull the trigger. And I was like, wait a minute. I'm used to having to be like 99%.
Yeah. 160.
My money. There, It's my company. We have to guarantee success.
Yeah.
And she said to me, the time that you're going to waste, the time and the resources that you're going to waste going from 85% to 99%, we've lost our advantage. And anything that isn't what it appears to be, she's done your due diligence, you've gone through all of those pieces. Anything else, we just pivot. And I learned very quickly that pivoting is crucial. there's no plan that is going to be perfect, and the
Yeah.
number of times that we had to pivot on things was quite significant. But it's easier to move or to steer a moving vehicle, right? When you're in motion, it's easier to make those pivots and adjustments. And so it was quite the experience. That was my first sort of like large VP role in a large organization post Red.
Well, see, and that's an interesting distinction too, right? Because I mean, the position of Randstad in the market is you have that luxury too of being able to pivot while in motion. Whereas
Exactly.
if you're a smaller company, yes, you're very agile and you can pivot all the time, but it can also be utterly destructive. If you pivot often when you're a small company, you may never land on anything. Like there isn't that like resource engine behind it yet to have the luxury to do a lot of pivots.
It's very true, and that was part of the. It was liberating to be able to, like, the other expression, build the plane while you fly it, right? Like, it's there's something liberating about that piece, but there is maybe less. You don't feel that sense of urgency as much as when it's your skin on the line.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Well, so how do you feel that? I mean, there's pros and cons, obviously, to both. But from a startup where the buck stops with you and you're one of the founders, to being in a VP role where, again, you're reimagining a whole department, you are building the plane as you fly in the biggest staffing agency that exists. How do you feel the pros and cons weigh, or like the big differences in, again, like we're saying, positioning yourself, like not so much the internal, but like going out there and going to market?
Yeah, I mean,
differences shake out that you did both back to back?
Yeah,
in a good or bad way.
I think the messaging is very different, and I think it needs to be authentic. I mean, you can't just be putting it on because you're in a different type of organization, and I think that was part of the difficult transition towards authenticity within a large company like Randstad.
Yeah,
it was very easy to be authentic at Red Recruitment and say, hey, we're small, but we're going to fight for your business. We're going to partner with you. We're going to be an integral part of how you operate, and all of those things that are very easy for me to say, as it just fits with my personality, who I am as a human. Harder to do that in a massive organization where you're not even dealing necessarily with the end client. You're dealing with the MSP that has the relationship with the client, right? Like you're so far removed from
seriously,
hiring manager who has the bum in the seat that's doing the work on the floor. That being said, there's ways to find meaning in that, and I had to find those ways, because I just can't operate in that sort of Uber sales. Here's a body, I don't care, I'm just going to move on to the next thing. Not that anybody, I hope nobody really acts that way, but the perception
I feel like people do. Just saying.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, but
not everyone, but I'm saying they're certainly out there where it's just numbers.
Totally, and numbers are always going to be a part of it. I mean, I'm a data person. I love numbers. Numbers, help me sleep at night.
Yeah,
but there's got to be something beyond that. So when it came to building relationships with the MSPs, when it came to building relationships with candidates and gleaning information, like going to find different ways to get the information that we needed to find out what the culture and success was going to look like in those organizations, in the clients that we were working with, that was part of the challenge. It's just a little bit tougher to do from a larger organization.
Absolutely.
That much further removed. But I think it's about reframing it in your mind, because at first I felt like this is so far away from who I am and what I've done, right? To be different if I had gone into like the perm practice or something like that, where it was still client centric and you're close to the client. But it was almost like a neat sort of way to experience a different part of the industry and yet find that meaning in it at the same time.
Yeah, well, because that's the thing is, as you said earlier, right, with Red Recruitment, part of the value proposition was, hey, we're going to really partner with you guys and give you bespoke service and be an extension of your company to an extent, which Randstad is not going to do in the same way at all because they're giants, right?
Yeah.
And part of the value prop was also sort of differentiating yourself by saying, we're not going to do this kind of business because we don't do that. We only do this one thing. Whereas Randstad are famously like, we do friggin' everything. Like, we'll do whatever you want. We'll create things that you didn't know you needed to do and do them for you.
But at the same time, even in an organization like Randstad, I remember, I can't remember what year it was, but there was one, it's probably 2 or 3 years ago, that the analysts that were following Randstad, public company, they said, look, like, you guys are generalists, and we're not going to be we're not going to support you in the way that we would if you were specialists. And so there was a huge shift in the mentality at Randstad even to become more specialized. The market wanted us to be specialists, not generalists. And so when you think about that in a large organization, it doesn't mean that you're not going to do things across the board. You're not going to go and work on all these different types of roles, work with all these different types of clients. But the mindset was going from, hey, instead of being a mile wide and an inch deep, let's build these teams that are each an inch wide and a mile deep,
right,
that together are a mile wide and a mile deep.
Right.
That was the understanding of it. But in a small business, you don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
So maybe you could be 4 inches wide and a mile deep, but to expect yourself to be a mile wide and a mile deep, you're setting yourself up for failure.
For sure. Yeah, you can't do it all. But that's interesting then, that there's surprising to me or to other people who are maybe perceive those two experiences as super different, that at the end of the day, here you are getting into Randstad, doing something you've never done before, but it's kind of a similar value proposition, right? Which is specializing, knowing who you are, but more importantly, knowing who you're not, and not trying to do that or veering off course, creating more of a relationship based on your identity of, I am who you talk to for this. Let's focus on this and be amazing at this one thing or two things or whatever.
And I think one of the biggest surprises was how transferable those skills were and are.
Really?
I think, everybody struggles with imposter syndrome.
Sure.
That was a big piece of it going in. But I started to realize, wait a minute, like, I can draw from the experiences that I have to influence how I'm approaching this. And it's really about a growth mindset. There's no two ways about it. If you come in and you try to just do things the way you've always done them, it's not going to work. But if you've got a growth mindset, say, hey, let's take the pieces and the elements that resonated with me, because so much of it is about that, like, finding your purpose, why it is you do what you do, and then incorporating that into no matter where you are, no matter what company you're with, it's drawing on what that purpose is. Did a lot of work around that to figure out what that overarching purpose is in life. It's not just work, but it's all aspects of life. And it's a really valuable thing to have in mind, whether you're looking at a marriage or kids, like parenting or job. No matter what it is, that purpose needs to sort of permeate all of those different aspects.
Yeah, I mean, that level of self-awareness. I love that we're already here. Usually I save these for the back end of the episode, Ian, but it's great that we're already on the psychological, emotional, existential part of things. But I do think that I believe deep down that that's what makes one feel successful or be successful in the market, right? Is aligning your strengths and sense of purpose and being aware of what those are into every aspect of your life. And it's interesting to hear that even on such polar opposite seeming jobs and environments, that's still what helped you succeed in both.
Absolutely. And I think the older I get, the more gray beard I get, as less hair, but beard. I think the more I realize it's all connected, right? It's not work life, personal life, parenting, family, all of those things. It's all connected, what we do and how we approach it. I think we've created these buckets and barriers between these things to try and protect ourselves, and we've done nothing but spread ourselves too thin or compartmentalize ourselves into these different spaces.
Yeah, I feel like that's where people burn out, right? Is when you do try to do things based on what you think you have to do or what you set out for yourself is this is the way it has to be, and you give yourself all these limitations, as opposed to, and it's frightening of course, but showing up authentically and kind of knowing who you are and showing up authentically in every aspect of your life and just sort of taking the ride is what
Absolutely.
prevents you from burning out and also helps you get more successful, hopefully.
Absolutely. And in each of the teams that I've worked with, in every company that I've worked with, I've always kind of started off the meetings with my direct reports talking about the fact that I view vulnerability as a strength.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get rid of the pretext that you have to know everything, that that if you don't know something, it's a weakness. It's we talked about purpose, but what I realized my purpose was to create an environment where people can show up as their best selves.
Yeah.
That's me as a father. That's me as a boss. That's me as an employee, as a musician that I do on the side. Like all of those things. Like I want to create an environment where people can show up as their best selves. And I think that once I identified that, it just brought so many things into alignment as far as my purpose for, like, why am I doing this? What is that reasoning? And it all kind of aligns. And then how you talk to people when you express that too, so my teams knew vulnerability, showing up as your best self, all of those things were important to me. So I created a safe space for them to be able to come and be their authentic selves, to ask questions that maybe they would have tried to hide before, and bring it to the forefront.
Yeah, that's amazing. And this is funny because here we are on an event here where we're talking about you recently getting into an AI consulting firm. And let's get to that. And I'd love your thoughts. And this is my impression of Greenlight as a client that I've worked with, or as people that I've known over off and on for years, is that funnily enough, of all of the people that I interact with, the ones who seem the most focused in their hiring process on valuing and appreciating authenticity and real, like, human elements of creativity, learning skills, resilience and whatever, in a real way, and not really focusing on a lot of the other speeds and feeds, have been the AI company, which is hilarious to some, perhaps, because again, the perception is that AI is going to replace humans, whatever else. But interestingly, the perspective is like a lot more focused on and appreciative of human qualities that only humans have: empathy, creativity, learning skills, blah, blah, negotiation, whatever, resilience, coming from people who do process automation, which is supposed to be taking away everyone's jobs.
It's very funny. I mean, it was part of the interview process with Greenlight. I was listening for what those values were, and a lot of companies talk about values and whatnot, but authenticity was one, accountability was the other.
Yeah.
So those two aspects to me were huge selling features for joining this company, and they came directly from Shamez, the CEO. And I started talking about vulnerability and authenticity and creating that environment where people can show up as their best selves. And it was just like this sort of there's a congruity to it. There was just the sense that, like, okay, yeah, this is lining up. And 5 weeks in, I can say it's been exactly what was shown in the interview process. It's a family. They call it the Glamily, Greenlight family. And it very much is like that. I mean, there's accountability. There's all the things that go into running a successful business, but with authenticity at the center, you can't. There's no replacement for that. Like that's, you either have it or you don't.
Yep, for sure. And it's that mentality of, like, at the core, it's the same thing when you extend an offer to somebody on paper, but mentality wise, are you hiring a person or are you filling a job? Right? Are you just like, I'm only seeing you as your abilities on paper and that's it? Or it's like, I'm hiring you as a person that I see as a resource for this company. And yes, these are the tasks you're doing today, but I'm actually hiring you and not your resume.
And I think we've all been there in the sense of working with clients that get that.
Yeah.
Where, I can send you people that have a resume that tick all the boxes that you have on your job description. Or I can send you the person that I think, having worked with you as a client, knowing your teams, knowing you as a leader, the qualities that you look for, I can send you a person that I think is going to be with you for the next 5, 6, 7 years.
Yep.
You're going to grow and be an integral part of your team. And I mean, I loved working with the clients that understood that. And like, yes, you have to have some technical skills and abilities, but the who you are as an individual trumps all of that. And I think we've all placed people that ticked all the boxes, but were a terrible fit. But you have to work with what the client is giving you, right? Some clients, they need the boxes ticked, and they're not willing to necessarily look outside of that.
For sure. And I just think it depends, like at the core, maybe it depends on what boxes need ticking, or not, right? Like in designing what a job is. And I think that's probably what's going to change as a lot of processes are automated. Like, it's just, you're at the very tip of this right now, but I mean, soon that'll be super normal that people use RPA and whatever to sort of realign how people do business at all. So then it's like, in my opinion, those human elements will probably go up in value on the job market. Hopefully. I think that that's a positive potential outcome from the use of these AI tools that take grunt work away from humans, even if it's desk grunt work. You know what I mean?
But you look at the invoicing world, right? The robots that Greenlight uses for invoice reading and things like that. I'm learning about all of this stuff. I'm by no means an expert. Shamez, if you're on this call, please. I'm using the things that you taught me.
Shamez, earmuffs. We'll go. Just
but we're able to implement these robots that are able to do a lot of that grunt work and the things that were very much administration, data entry, things like that. Not technically, they're important roles because data integrity and accuracy and things like that are super important. But companies that really get it and they see sort of where the next wave is coming from, they're not just laying those people off as they replace them with RPA type stuff. They're reskilling and upskilling those people. So somebody doing data entry could be repurposed in another part of the organization in another sort of data analytics side of things. And so we're seeing companies that are, providing actually providing opportunities for people to upskill and potentially earn more money in more skilled positions. And then at the same time, we're reducing the number of errors that come from data entry. Like humans are fallible and can make mistakes. And so there's a lot of things that come out of that, but there's always a need for people. And like you said, I think that there's going to be more of a concentration on who you are as an individual, the softer skills that come as a part of that. You can even see it in executive leadership right now. There's a real turn away from just the sheer technical, like you've been there, done that type of mentality. The softer skills are much more valuable. Like the companies are understanding that leaders need to have those softer skills as well as the technical skills.
Totally. And I think that's a welcome change, right? It kind of feels like for a little while, the job market was skewing more toward just efficiency, just numbers, and kind of like dehumanizing a lot's roles. But now that a lot of that can be taken over, it brings us back to, an age-old question of even just like, what's a job? Like, what's the value? Why am I a person paying a group of people, that's what a company is really, it's just a group of people, to get something done? It's never just to get it done. It's usually how you feel when it's happening. So I would respond to things like advertising and customer service, whatever, right? Like, I mean, it's how you feel too. So yeah, I mean, hopefully the soft skills are coming back in fashion because frankly, as recruiters, and I'm sure everybody here will agree, a lot of people's soft skills post-COVID, mine included, got shittier. And they're not really valued very much. So you're usually so busy, you can't really start to work on expressing yourself better.
You know what though? I actually found the opposite for me. No. And I mean, no judgment whatsoever. I get it. But I joined Randstad in August of 2020. So right in the midst of COVID. I took over my first team as a VP in January of 2021. I never met a single person face to face until December. They were all in Toronto and Montreal.
Yeah.
And so I actually had to learn how to build relationship, communicate, effectively through massive transition, like that whole reimagining process with that the offshore team and the onshore team, new comp structures, like all of those things we tackled completely remotely. I'd never met any of these people face to face, and I had to lean so heavily into the softer side of things. But I think some of that was just circumstance, right? If I'd been in the same company through that whole experience, maybe it would have been different. People, you sort of have shorthand already, like you can take, there's certain things you can take for granted,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
didn't have that luxury. And so much of what I had to do was on the softer side.
Well, yeah, and I think that that's a great example too. Is all of the I think I like the positivity of that. It's an opportunity. All of the video that we do now instead of face to face to
Mm.
actually sharpen those skills. I think that that's a really positive idea. I'd love to ask you about, because we are getting on it. So it's already 45 minutes
Oh,
past
wow.
here somehow. Um, I'd love to get onto the topic a little bit of being in the position you're in with Greenlight, heading up staffing. There's a lot of, it's a hot topic out there right now, selling service, or some people call it solutions, some people call it service, so tech service or tech solutions versus selling staffing. And especially for people who are coming from staffing, the word solutions is thrown around all the time when you're selling staffing. It doesn't actually mean tech solutions, though. So I feel like there's a lot of crossover of terms that are the same. It's a semantic argument at the core, where the people are not talking about the same thing at all. So it's like we're speaking different languages to each other and not realizing, and nodding and whatever. But in Greenlight, it's very clear. I mean, there's the solutions team, the RPA team who's doing implementation, and staffing. They're actually two very separate things. Do you want to maybe touch on that a little bit in terms of how that's different, even from maybe what you've seen in the past or what you've seen in the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a huge push from a lot of staffing organizations to tack on a solutions arm to what they're doing and expand in that area, which is a bit of a tougher sell than what Greenlight has done, which is they've been this consulting group, the solutions group that has brought in a tech staffing division, right? That they saw the need that the clients may not need a fully outsourced solution. They might just need bodies for their internal resources. And so that's where the tech staffing piece was born. And so I think for us, it's incredibly clear how it divides, right? And I think for me, my first goal, actually, within the second week, I started asking for training in what RPA is, what clients we're working with on the consulting side, how we position ourselves, all of the different aspects of it, because I see myself as a representative of Greenlight, period, right?
Yeah.
I have to lead the tech staffing business, but I want to be an ambassador for whatever it is. Our goal is to solve a problem for a client. And then we were talking about this before, really, so much of it, the breakdown, I think, in our industry happens a lot when the mindset is what's in it for me.
Yes, for sure.
As the leader of tech staffing, if I only did things that help the tech staffing side, I'm only doing a small percentage of what I could do for the whole business.
Yep.
So one of the first things I did was sit down with all of the people that were selling RPA to say, hey, how are you operating? What are you seeing in the market? Who are you working with? Who could I tag along with? Who do I know that I can bring you along with, so that we can basically just offer up, here's who we are, here's what we do, what do you need? And then on the back end, we can take care of that. Who cares? Let's service the client to the utmost that we can, figure out what works best for them. And oftentimes it's about them choosing. But it's a mentality that I think we miss out on in the staffing industry, because so much of it comes down, even more granular than that. One of the downsides to specializing I've seen within certain organizations in the staffing world is you start to specialize and you start telling salespeople, you can sell this, but you can't sell this.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
You have to pass this off. And oh my God, that is a contentious issue when you start to limit what somebody can sell. Specialization is important. I don't have a silver bullet. I don't have a magical, like, how do you solve that? But my preference is, hey, let's just go in, let's figure out what the client needs, let's offer it up, and on the back end we'll figure it out. I'm not worried about losing out on a staffing sale to somebody on the RPA side if that's really what the client needs. And my hope would be that the RPA side wouldn't be worried about missing out on a sale that goes to the tech staffing side if that's really what the client needs, right? And we'll work together collaboratively to service them as best we can.
And that's interesting too, because I mean, and this is no shade on Randstad; they've been a giant success for forever.
Absolutely.
So yeah. It's no shade on them, but to start to silo up a giant juggernaut of a company and say it's the same as having individual small specialized companies is not entirely true, right? It is still different. It is siloing and not specialization that is separate entities. And this is, again, they're just different approaches. But internally, I feel like siloing internally to give the illusion of different specializations and sub companies is a little navel gazing. It is a little bit of thinking about myself and how I can appear to other people. And it isn't from just to sort of psychoanalyze on a higher level. It isn't, if Randstad was an individual, it isn't someone who's being fully authentic in a way, right? Like the authenticity would be to show up and be like, this is who we are, this is who we're not. And let's just be good at that. With a giant company like that, I understand they're trying to adapt. It's a process, right? And they will figure all that out. But there are upsides, I think, like you're saying, to just being like fully focused on here's all the stuff we do, and here's all the value we can bring to you guys. That vulnerability and that authenticity hopefully gets a client to open up to you about, okay, here are our real challenges. Instead of me just saying, giving you this is a service we need, right?
Exactly. And I'll just put this out there too. This is not unique to Randstad by any means. I would hazard to say that any large organization is
any yes.
Just happens to be what I've experienced. So no shade on in that sense.
Zero. They're doing well, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Sure. But yeah, I would say that I think the biggest demand or request from clients has been, hey, can you just make it easy to buy? Like, can you just make it simple? And oftentimes we get in our own way by creating complexity, right? And so it's one thing to have complexity on the back end where it's not client visible, right? And where let's do whatever makes sense and is simple for the client. If there's complexity, we'll handle it on the back end and protect and just make sure the client isn't experiencing that piece of it, right?
Yeah.
I think the other sort of motto that I would go by when it came to the larger companies, larger territories. So, I was on that RCD team, very much Eastern Canada focused, even though I'm in the West. Eventually took over Western Canada. And then in my last sort of 8 months there, I took over the sales, anything that was non-governmental sales across Canada. So it was these regional teams that were very much isolated and siloed. And so part of my job was to bring them together to say, hey, how are we approaching this, right? As an organization. And one of the principles that I implemented everywhere that I went was, okay, we are going to be exactly the same everywhere that we are, except where we're different. And where we're different, we're going to do it intentionally. There's a reason behind it. We're different in this area because of this. It's not accidentally different. We're going to be the same everywhere that we go, as much as humanly possible. And anywhere that requires a shift or a change, we're going to do it intentionally.
Yeah, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. And again, doing these things with intention, the intention being like a lot of your values too that you've brought up, I think are lacking certainly in the job market on the whole. The authenticity piece and what have you. So the positioning then that you find on the solution side, do you feel, so I'm guessing you're also going after different people with a bit of a different approach when you're part of a solutions environment than if you were just purely staffing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the lens that I'm going after it through initially is the tech staffing side of it.
For sure.
But it's looking holistically. So, the questions are not, do you need a body?
Yeah.
The questions are, what projects do you have? What are the roadblocks that you're encountering? What would create, like, what's the barrier that if we removed would give you instant success? those are the types of questions. And then from there, if it's down the road of, hey, we need to outsource this, like we just don't have the resources, then that's a very distinct avenue that we go down. If it's like, hey, I just need 2 more people, like my people are swamped, I need these 2 resources, these 2 types of people, then that's another path, and you walk down that path. But having those tools in your tool belt, whether I'm directly responsible for them or not, I don't care.
Yeah.
It's really, how do I show the client that I really care about helping? So like, what is it that I can do to help? And if I can't do anything to help, well, that's okay. Like, let's build a relationship so that if there ever is anything that I can do to help, that that I'm here and that you're going to come to me and that I'm going to treat you fairly. I'm not going to try and shove something down your throat that you don't need.
Yeah, I mean, that's great, right? Like, again, so if we were to recap then, because we are approaching the final minutes here, but if we were to recap, the differentiator at the end of the day came from you, no matter which role you were in. Tiny company, huge company, or now a solutions-based, not even a staffing firm really, even though you're leading tech staffing, but a solutions tech, AI-driven company. At the end of the day, the differentiator is being yourself, the authenticity, the sort of curiosity, the actually giving a crap about helping out the other person, as opposed to being super navel-gazy and what's in it for me.
Yeah.
Is the big differentiator at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And you can't go wrong. Like, people sense authenticity. They sense if you are, if you don't care and you're pretending to care, they see it.
Yeah.
Right. So some of that work is very much internal. It's why do I do what I do? I often tell people, like, I like that I sell people for a living. I don't think I could sell a product. I'm just not that person. I see it as problem solving, and I love solving problems. Like, that gets me up in the morning, that keeps me up at night sometimes. But it's the sense of, I've never seen myself as a salesperson. I never really, like, the first time that somebody told me I was a salesperson, I laughed out loud. I was like, that's not possible. I'm the least salesy person you'll ever meet. But it's because the pieces that I latch on to that create purpose for me are, hey, you've got a problem. I might have some resources that can solve that problem for you. That's a win-win. And that's a relationship that will last a very long time. Because it wasn't about a product. It wasn't about a transaction. It was about help, right? It was helping somebody in a time of need. And yeah, there's a business component to it. Great. We make money. We're profitable. We're all those things. But at the end of the day, it's about solving that problem for that client and that human.
Yeah, and I love all of this stuff. And again, it's no mistake that you're on this show and that I stack the deck always with people who think the same way that I do, which is probably, I should get someone who really disagrees with me at some point. But I totally agree with everything you're saying. And, on the AI topic though too, right? We had somebody on right at the beginning of this whole show who said the line that I've been sort of requoting to recruiters in terms of AI. Like, I think when people try to automate their content and use AI to create their content and their outreach, whether it's sequenced emails or posts online or whatever else, I feel like that's where we get into scary territory, like the so-called uncanny valley, that like creepy feeling you get when AI generates something humans are supposed to generate.
Yeah.
But automating process is super useful, right? And liberates us to be able to be more human. How do you feel about that as the distinction? Like, automate process, not content.
100%. I actually really agree with that. The thing that it reminds me of, my daughter is she loves musical theater. She's an actor, singer, like very much involved in that space. One of the exercises that they do, and I don't know if it was that term that you just used, uncanny valley.
Uncanny valley?
Yeah, there's some term, and what they have to do is like act out a scene, but with something that's just a little bit like inhuman. That's not real, and it's super off-putting. Like, you can watch somebody act it out, and there's something that just doesn't seem authentic and real as a human. You pick up on that. The perception is so, even if you can't put your finger exactly on what it is. And I think that you nailed it right there, is that, you lose that authenticity, the voicemail that you leave, that, if that was an automated voicemail, like, you're not going to get the response. They're going to be like, it's just another, AI machine, whatever. Right. It's our humanness that will attract our clients and our candidates and all of those things. And we can't lose that piece. But let's automate the crap out of everything else.
Yes, yes. See, everybody, you heard it here first from a guy who's actually selling AI solutions. It's important to be yourself and stop sending everyone sequenced emails that are written by AI that just piss everyone off.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Ian. I appreciate it. This was an awesome conversation. I'd love to have you back on again in future. And I wish you all the best at Greenlight.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. This was a blast. Went by super fast.
It did. We'll have to have a recap in the future for sure.
Sounds great.
And if any of you guys are seeing this after the fact, oh wait, we got a comment here at the buzzer, especially relevant in the age of AI that we're quickly rushing into. Yeah, for the authenticity piece. There you 100%.
Go. Yeah.
I mean, yes, and thank you for that comment. And if anybody is watching this after the fact, please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or comments. Perhaps also to Ian on LinkedIn if he's comfortable with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, please. Always happy to have a chat.
Cool. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Cheers.
Thanks.